And welcome everybody to another episode of Smart Money Circle. With me today is a very special guest, President and CEO of Build-A-Bear Workshop, Ms. Sharon Price John. Sharon, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Adam. It's a pleasure to be here. Appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely my pleasure. So Sharon, can you tell us a little about yourself and your company, how you got started and your story, so to speak?
Yeah, so I'll try to make that short so we can get to some other probably more interesting information. But I started in the advertising industry years ago in New York City, believe it or not. But that's great because two of my favorite subjects were psychology and art.
Okay.
I love how that sort of mashes together, and not only in the ad business, but ultimately in leadership. And in running corporations overall. And it might not make as much sense when you're looking out on what you're expected to do in your life, but looking back on it, it does make sense. And decided to stay in New York and get my MBA at Columbia. Nice. And then entered into the toy industry because I love staying young and having fun. And ultimately, really, I was more interested in consumer-centric brands than some other opportunities that I could have had with that background. So from Mattel to VTech to Hasbro, and then to where I've been the high privilege to be involved in, and in some cases turn around a lot of household brands at some of these iconic companies, from Nerf to My Little Pony, and then being a part of the Transformers movie release for Hasbro all those years ago. That really was the beginning of a complete evolution for that amazing organization. And then I got a taste of retail with the Stride Right Children's Group. Stayed in the kids space, but learned a lot about specialty retail and worked with a fabulous team there and turned that business around in a couple of years. You can see now, as I was saying, how the dots connect. Now that then led me to be a candidate to be the next in line behind Maxine Clark, the founder of Build-A-Bear Workshop in 2013. So Build-A-Bear is celebrating its 25th anniversary this year. Can you believe that?
Happy birthday.
I know.
Yeah.
It is it's an iconic brand. It has earned its place in pop culture and pop culture history. We've now sold 200 million furry friends, and
wow,
over 200 million furry friends in that time. And that's countless memories and birthdays, and the reasons people go to Build-A-Bear are as many as the bears that we've sold. Right. And we love that we have woven ourselves into the fabric of people's families and family stories, and putting that heart in the bear, which is a part of our in-store process, so special for people. Kids, it's amazing how kids can still tell you why they bought this Build-A-Bear 20 years ago, like what they were doing, what they were thinking. So at the end of the day, when I looked at this opportunity, one, it's a magical brand. I love brands. But the business side had not completely recovered from the recession back in 2013. And I get that. They had such an explosive start. And then the recession came, and it was hard to then focus on the bottom line when you've been focused on the chase for so long.
Right.
Right. So we had some, right? It's classic.
It's so classic. It's so classic.
Yeah, and we had a lot of work to do and some tough decisions to make to return the company to profitability after quite a few years of contraction. And we got focused on, like you would in any turnaround or any situation like this, where does our value lie? And how can we access that value and amplify our core competencies and our core skill sets? And then the tough prioritization of that process. And we put the brand at the center of where our value was. And when you think about this, what we identified is that, wow, I'll put it this way. We're only a mall-based retailer if we choose to be.
Right.
Because the brand is so much bigger than that. In fact, we're not Build-A-Bear Workshop. We're Build-A-Bear that happens to have workshops.
Right.
Right.
I love that. Yeah.
That's kind of a mind blower there when you think about it. And if we're Build-A-Bear, that means love and engagement and all these memories that I was just sharing with you, then what else can you be? So that was the beginning of the creation of a multi-year strategic plan to pivot the company from not being a retailer that happened to have built this fabulous brand, but a branded company that happens to have retail as one of its revenue streams.
That's awesome. I love that. And you like psychology like me. I just wrote a book called Psychological Analysis. You can see behind me. And that subtle shift in psychology or in the psyche, and just in the way you internalize it is so huge. And of course, it showed up in the bottom line too. Earnings exploded last year. Congratulations. I know we just had earnings again. Revenue was up, what, 39%? And let me get the numbers here. And earnings were up almost 70% last quarter. So I love turnarounds, Sharon. I love how you came into a situation. Can you talk, before we go into the earnings and talk more about that, can you talk about how you were able to identify what the problems were, how you were able to take control, shift, talk about that transition and that turnaround, if you don't mind, so people watching can learn and can see how you did it.
Yeah. So again, I think that so much of what you decide to do is really understanding the possibilities of what can be, and assessing where is your value, what are your back to that, what are your core competencies and what are your skill sets, because you've got to be able to do something. You think about turnarounds as one, you have some absolute things that need to happen, from things like returning to profitability. Fine. That's not a strategy, that's a tactic. Right. That's an absolute necessity.
Well said.
And, right. And there are certainly some levers, if you've been doing this for a while, that that you can pull, whether it's margin expansion through value engineering or cutting costs or going through the org chart, or whether not everybody, a lot of people know how to do this stuff. It's the creation of the vision that then gets people energized. And that vision often needs to be bigger than the company itself. It needs to be, you need to believe, get the organization to believe, and this is back to psychology. Why do we exist? Do we deserve to exist? Right? And are we a commodity? What are we? What are we doing? Why do you come to work every day? And why should you be emotionally connected to this brand? Not just as a guest, but as somebody that supports this company. And we dug deep on that. And when you think about the value that furry friends and teddy bears have, I mean, it's so simple and it's easy to just kind of, no pun intended, fluff off. But
I like that.
At the end of the day, we play an important part in the psychological development of children.
Right.
We play a critical role in making people smile. Right. We change the dynamics of maybe bedtime with a parent.
Right.
It just goes on and on and on. The emotional connection that people create with furry friends, and we're there for that all the time. The sharing of a furry friend and a fuzzy hug, in the worst of times and the best of the times, we're like, wow, that just makes your day a little bit better, right?
Yeah,
and
100%.
If it's the best day in a kid's world, like their birthday, you know where they want to go? Build-A-Bear. Right. Third of our business is Build-A-Bear. So we make even the best day better. And do you know where kids want to go when they've had a tough day? Build-A-Bear.
Right.
So we came up with a mission statement of, we add a little more heart to life. Nice. And we really do it with the sign, the heart, because inside that heart can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. And I know the process, but you put a Make-A-Wish on that heart. So that's really what we're doing. Literally, we put a heart in everything we do.
Right.
Now, when you can get that type of emotional connection and vision and importance to your brand and your business and what you do every day and how you touch people's lives, that's very empowering to an organization. And then if you can get an organization to believe, and this is where data comes in, data, the analytics of, is it possible to believe that we can be more than a mall-based retailer? Right. Yeah.
That's very powerful. Very
powerful. Is that feasible? Right. Does that make sense? Can you imagine Build-A-Bear, with outbound licensed products?
Right.
Is that make sense that we could manifest in other toys or bedding or bikes? Of
Right.
course you can. That's not a hard thing to understand, right? That's a pretty classic approach. Can you imagine Build-A-Bear in the content creation business?
Right.
Really, that's not really a hard thing to do, is it?
Not at all.
Can you imagine Build-A-Bear around the world? Does a bear hug translate into building an international business?
It's universal, of course.
Yeah. Of course it is. And then all of a sudden, you're not just a mall-based retailer anymore, which was part of the burden. If you think about what we were facing at the time, the retail apocalypse, the emergence of e-commerce, the rise in the digital economy, that's a lot of pressure. Mall traffic tanking in the first 7 years that I was here. Mall traffic, by many reports, fell in half.
Wow.
And so we had to do a lot of store rationalization. But if you believe there's something bigger, all of the hard work of the first tactic, return to profitability, isn't so mundane.
Right.
That's
very powerful. Your heart goes into it. Yeah.
And a lot of times leaders just talk about the step that's right in front of the organization, which may not be half as inspiring. Like a lot of times, that's just a lot of hard work. And the difference is, under all, many circumstances, you're doing a lot of hard work. It's work. It's called work for a reason, right?
Yep.
The difference is, what do you think about that hard work? Right. Is it exhausting or is it exhilarating?
Right.
And when the two sides of that coin are determined based on whether you believe there's a reason for doing it.
Interesting. So the why, right? Why am I doing this? So if you can identify why and associate pleasure to it instead of pain, make it exhilarating, that's going to be a lot more propelling, or a lot more, I guess, the path of least resistance. It'll help push everything forward. Whereas if you don't consciously associate pleasure with it and make it exhilarating, it'll be work or just a job, and then pain you can associate pain with it, and then it becomes just a drag and it just weighs you down. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Absolutely. We're not just returning to profitability. We have to, that's just a step in the road. You have to return to profitability to be able to embrace this vision.
That's next level. I love that. So let's talk about earnings, and then also Build-A-Bear going forward, the path for the next year, 2, 3, etc. What would you like to share there?
Well, we just reported our most profitable year from a pre-tax income perspective in the history of Build-A-Bear.
Congratulations.
Yeah, well, congratulations to the organization. I mean, for us to do that, through COVID, with so many changes happening, it shows a lot of agility and resilience and passion that this team has for this company. I am just really, really proud of the results that we've had. And we generated $411 million of revenue for fiscal 2021. And that was a 61% increase over 2020 and a 20% increase over 2019. So, just very strong results at this really high profitability level, with a gross margin of 53%. So significant improvement. And that we actually shared in our recent earnings call some comparisons to 2012, when we first identified this strategy of taking Build-A-Bear, recognizing the power of Build-A-Bear, and monetizing that across multiple revenue streams. And we did this in the last 2 years by focusing in on 3 specific strategies that we identified.
Okay.
One is the acceleration of our digital transformation. Okay. And that was based on a belief that, even though we're known as retailtainment or experiential retail, in fact, given credit sometimes for being an early inventor, or certainly an early adopter, almost an inventor of the way it's seen today. But there was some, this is one of those where there was a little bit of pushback on, can Build-A-Bear ever participate fairly in e-commerce? Right. How could that possibly work when, we're all about going somewhere and doing this thing, making these bears. But one of the things that I'd learned in the toy industry with some of the brands that I'd shared with you was there's a magic moment in the lives of toys. It's when you become multi-generational.
Right.
When the people that played with products when they were kids become adults and start to have children, they love to, and this is a natural tendency, share the things that they loved with their own children.
100%.
Right. So
100%.
Build-A-Bear happens to be one of those things. And at the same time, they often get re-engaged with that brand in different ways.
Right.
So about the time around 20 years old is it when a brand kind of hits this place, and you either turn it into a flywheel, or sometimes it's the beginning of the end of a toy brand. And we systematically and purposefully turn that into a flywheel. We mashed up the brand with a lot of different pop culture brands, and created Build-A-Bear versions of, Darth Vader or
Right.
Baby Yoda or any of these things. And we started to see these things over index with teens, tweens, and adults. And we were bringing a different consumer back to Build-A-Bear. They weren't purchasing these for their children. They were buying them for themselves. And so we launched a collectibles and affinity business.
Nice.
And now the percentage of our sales to teens, tweens, and adults is 40% of our total business.
Wow. And that was just an untapped market, almost a blind spot before.
Yeah. Or, somewhat of a blind spot, but also possibly something that would not have been possible.
Right.
Without crossing that multi-generational mark.
Right.
So, and with that, it opened up an entirely new, much, much larger addressable market. At first is the kids business, our core business, which churns a lot, right? A few kids come in every year, kids leave every year, we call it the leaky bucket. So we have to always be working to fill that bucket back up and keep our affinity and awareness levels high with kids. But that collector market, which we then graduated into gifting for adult to adult gifting, has opened up an entirely new opportunity for us. So when you think about using the digital side, where people tend to want to have that quicker, seamless, frictionless kind of shopping. And indeed, that's what's happened. They're our primary guests online, where kids are our primary guests in stores. Not a hard one to figure out. They're now, a big part of the future of Build-A-Bear, because both the addressable market and these two categories of business, whether it's collectibles and affinity or gift giving, many times the size, right? The addressable market is many times the size of the kids market. Either collectibles or gifting is many times the size of the stuffed animal or toy market.
Yeah, no question.
So that's a game-changing pivot that has a long horizon for us that's pretty exciting, that came out of kind of the acceleration of this digital transformation. But along with that, it was all the back stuff of that. Like, well, it's not just about building out an exciting website. We got to, in making sure the graphics look great, it's got to work and it's got to be amazing. And then we, relaunched our loyalty program, and then we launched and implemented a lot of omni-channel capabilities, like buy online, ship from store, buy online, pick up in store. All of that happened in the last couple of years in the COVID situation. We had a lot of it in place, and we were putting building blocks in place. We'd already overhauled our entire IT infrastructure, put talent in place, and we're prepared to do that. Relationship with Salesforce, rebuilt all of our digital marketing capabilities. And, so we had a lot of the building blocks that really unleashed it. And in 2020, in the midst of closing down our entire retail organization, we saw triple-digit growth in e-com.
Oh, wow.
And then in 2021, we were able to then grow again, even with our stores open.
Sorry, so even during COVID, when everything shut down on Main Street, you saw a lot of sales continue because people still want to have that experience, but they just did it online.
Correct.
Got it. Interesting.
Well, it was more of a proof point of a hypothesis. And
that's exactly where I was going.
In a really acute way, in a test market that I never want to revisit.
Right. 100%. No, neither do I. Nobody wants to go back.
It's like, it would not be prudent as a CEO to say, hey, let's see how big we can make digital by shutting down our stores.
Yeah, no thanks.
Not
But that actually speaks to a really good point though, Sharon, because you saw an opportunity instead of getting frozen or just fear-based and that type of mentality, you did the exact opposite. You said, let me take this bad situation and turn it into a positive and pivot and be proactive about it. And boom, it opened up a whole new world.
Well, Adam, that's really that you nailed it. I mean, but the only thing that I'll put a finer point on this. It's not like there wasn't this at least a day or two that we froze.
I'm sure everybody, yeah, no question. Right.
I mean, we're good, but we're not that good. We're still human.
100%.
But we were set. We had, when COVID happened, and we really had to shut down in a 48-hour period 90+% of our revenue generating arm and furlough 90% of our organization.
Yeah, it's tough.
We were on the phone at 7:30, 8 a.m. Central Standard Time every single morning, Saturday and Sunday inclusive, my entire leadership team.
Wow.
Working through the what's right in front of you.
Right.
And look, and you spend a lot of years building the muscles of how to think about every dynamic and think about the future and what's around this corner. And I'm like, I don't care what's around the corner. I need to know about what's happening right now. Next 5 minutes.
Right.
That's what this decision about. This decision is not about tomorrow. Our decision is about having a tomorrow.
No question. I love that. So being able to be flexible in your approach and pivot when necessary is super, super important.
Yeah.
So you said there were 3 points. I just want to make sure we address all three.
Thank you. I was going to get to that.
No problem.
There's just an amazing moment. And one of the things, and you, I know will love this so much. One of the turning points of all of that was one day waking up, and I got on that call the next morning at 7:30. I'm like, I'm not calling this a COVID meeting anymore.
That's so good. So what did you call it?
Success meeting.
Love it. Well done. Yeah, fantastic.
Like, this is the success meeting. And from this moment on, our discussion is not going to be about, oh, our stores are closed. What do we do? From this moment on, I want you to think about this is, what would we do with our time, effort, energy, and capital if we had the luxury of our stores being closed?
So powerful. So powerful. So you took a negative, turned it into a positive, and even paying attention to the name of the meeting, so people can both subconsciously and consciously pay attention to the fact that we're going to succeed. That's the option. There's no other option. We're going to win. Yeah.
No. So yeah, that's that.
So
and the team, but the team, it's not that you just say that as a leader. People have to get it, right. And they did. They get it. They ran with it. They made this happen, and then they permeated that through the organization. And that was a major mindset change for us. We're not going to just survive this. We're going to thrive. We're going to rise.
Do you have any pushback?
Here and there, because it's tough. This
100%.
Is tough.
Yeah.
This is it is not hard to look at someone in that type of crisis and say, okay, she snapped.
Yeah, no question. Yeah.
But then what's the option?
You don't have one, but win.
That's right.
Yeah, you have. Yeah. No, I love that.
Learn a lot about who you are as a team, who you are as a person in those types of situations.
Yeah.
And then,
I love that.
Plenty of times before I got on the Zoom where I shook it off, and I got to go in there with everything good about this. Interesting.
So I want you to finish 3 points, but then I'm going to ask you my next question, but please, by all means.
The second point was the evolution of our entire retail fleet. Okay. What purpose do we want this to serve? First of all, we were getting a lot of questions about, could we thrive in the digital economy at all? Was that even a viable thought? And that's in that space of, well, what else are we going to do? It's the fastest growing channel in the world. I mean, we got to figure out how to participate in the digital economy. And by the way, it was 20% of our business last year. And it was less than 4 when I got here.
Wow.
Then the next was like, well, then, you shut down all your retail, everybody was like, well, shut down all your mall-based retail. I'm like, I know it doesn't look like it right now, but having a one-to-one relationship with guests, it's like having first-party data on steroids.
Right.
Right?
That's so powerful.
This will be our killer app. There is zero reason in the world why certain digital first companies are now it's like considered brilliant that they're backwards integrating into physical retail.
Right.
Like, oh, brilliant. I've already got that. And
signed, sealed, and delivered.
Yep. Forward integrating into digital. I don't know. So we already have this entire, ecosystem of digital and physical. And now what we needed to do was make sure we intertwine those. Now I fulfill from our stores. We buy online, ship, everything that I said, an omni-channel operation. We know we can cross-reference our loyalty program between people that are coming in stores and people that are coming in. We know where our value is. We know how to drive lifetime value. And now I think it's only about 65% of our stores are in what we would call a traditional mall.
Wow.
So we've significantly evolved. We rationalized, renegotiated, and evolved our entire store fleet and improved. And in the meantime of getting in a very different footprint, and a lot of them being in tourist locations where we tend to over-index on a lot of key metrics, we were able to improve our four-wall profit from less than 10% to over 25 at the end of 2021.
Wow, that's a huge jump. That's huge. So
it was, what a ride.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the third was kind of an obvious one, but just proper fiscal management, assure that we are managing a strong balance sheet, making those specific investments where we needed to from a capital perspective to return shareholder value. And a lot of those investments were in the IT infrastructure, supply chain improvements, sourcing diversification, that expansion of e-com as we talked about, and a shift to digital marketing from sort of traditional type of marketing to kids.
No, I love that. So there's 3 steps. Digitalization was number 1, evolution of retail fleet number 2, and then fiscal management number 3. And the numbers are fantastic. Your return on equity is over 46% or 45%, which is phenomenal for a company of your size and a retailer. Those are fantastic numbers. So earnings have grown double and triple digit over the last 4 quarters. Sales have grown double digits. So hats off to you. Fantastic, fantastic job. I want to shift the focus, Sharon, ask you about psychology again, because when I paused earlier, I'm fascinated about psychology. I love to know what makes people tick, pardon the pun there. But let's talk about child psychology. I love that you talk about winning and you focus on success meetings instead of COVID meetings, so on and so forth. These subtle but very, very important shifts in the narrative. Do you have any plans to introduce any of that? Or I know you market to parents and people with young kids and even tweens. I still consider them young. Incorporating that as a potential area that you can grow into as a new profit center for you?
So explain that to me a little more from a child psychology perspective.
Sure. So I'm fascinated with psychology. I love to learn, go from negative to positive and, so on and so forth. So when I see my kids, my daughter just turned 10, as I shared earlier, she said, peace out the single digits, which, okay. So, and we're big fans of Build-A-Bear. I'm in Florida and I see what you're talking about with the tourist heavy locations that are just slammed. We just passed by one of your stores the other day and my wife was like, hey, take a picture because you're gonna talk to Sharon. So I took a picture and I'll post it when I post it here in front of the store. But the psychology, so the kids, like most people at a young age, they don't know any better, they're learning. So they get frustrated when they try to do something and it doesn't work. So they're like, oh, I failed, or I can't do this. And then they get hard on themselves, or teaching how to ride a bike, or my son, or whatever the case may be. But I try to shift the narrative in their internal conversation to, I'm going to do it. Or at first it's hard, and then it becomes easy to do anything, learn how to read, to write, to ride the bike, to do anything. At first it's hard because you just don't know it. But the more you do it, the easier it gets. And then it just becomes second nature. Things like that. Would you entertain some kind of a psychology program, if you will, almost like math tutoring or some other kind of thing to, I guess, the next natural step? There's nowhere for parents to really go to get good psychology, I guess, success oriented, or achievement oriented or winning oriented approach in helping frame the child. I don't know if that I explained it well or not.
No, I think that's really fascinating. That's not in any of our business plans. Of course, we would want to, if we ever did explore something like that, we would want to work with, the right type of educated, individuals on that, whether child psychologist, child psychiatrist, whatever it is, to make sure that we're crafting that appropriately, but to the degree that Build-A-Bear can be a beacon of positivity. I think that's within the promise of our brand. I would also share that one of the things that we love about Build-A-Bear, and I think that even though a child might not ever be able to articulate this, when they come in, they know deep inside that this is an empowering process.
Right.
That that there are very few places in life where they're in charge.
Right.
And they can make anything they want, and they're not going to be judged. And if they want to put a hot dog outfit on a dragon, no,
it's
there's
happening.
not, right? And then put, some rock song inside it, with sparkly shoes. There's not a bear builder that is going to judge that or say, no, you need to be doing it this way. And our bear builders are actually trained to subtly guide parents to let their kids make what they want.
Love it.
It's really fascinating. They're like, well, you got this princess bear, so this is the dress that goes on that bear. And the bear builder will be like, let's let Susie figure out, how she wants to do this,
Right, of course.
It's really very, very subtle. And that's why the bear builders are so valuable in that one-on-one relationship. And they create such a great relationship with kids. I mean, a lot of the kids, they know their local bear builder. I mean, it's really, and that's why they want to spend their birthdays there. It's really special.
Yeah, I love that.
On that front, kids don't come out that way.
Right.
The world puts those doubts on children. There's not a child in the world that didn't, thought after they tried to stand and walk and fell down that went, well, that's it.
Get back up, of course.
I guess I'm just gonna crawl around for the rest of my life. I gave that a shot.
Yeah.
It is deep inside the human psyche to try again.
Yeah.
And all we need to do as a society is not kill it. We don't have to
embrace it. Yeah.
We don't have to teach that desire to try again. Watch how that happens as little kids evolve. In their earliest days, they will try anything over and over and over, and to the point that you just want to roll over and you're the one that wants to quit, right?
Right.
But they learn that, and that's a societal norm that I think would be really fantastic if we could give a lot broader permission on the measurements of when you should quit. But I think that a whole lot of even what I've been able to do in my career, let alone my life, has been that it's not over. I say it's over.
Right. I love that. Taking control and not being a victim, right?
It's not over. Right. And when we hit COVID, it wasn't over.
Right.
This will not be the end. Right. It'll end someday, maybe, but not this way. This is not okay. Yeah. And that we were talking about books earlier as well. And I'm looking forward to reading yours. I actually have a book coming out with Forbes.
That was my next question. Please tell me about your book. Yeah.
And the reason it's such a great transition is when they asked me about writing this, I'm like, I'm not going to write a business book. You can get that from so many people. And probably be better in my business book. but there was an awful lot that I went through to learn how to be successful. And so much of it is not about what's outside, it's about what's inside. And ended up writing a proposal to Forbes, and they're like, yeah, we'll do this. And it's really nothing like they've ever published before. Wonderful. And it's called Stories in Heart. Unlock the power of your personal stories to create a life you love.
I love it.
And it's not about me, but it uses these kind of snippets from my life all the way back to my childhood. And then about something that I learned that was a life lesson, and poses a question from the heart gives an exercise on how to think about like really what's ticking inside of you to make you make this decision or that decision. And then, challenges you to think about things differently going forward. And it goes all the way through to this last, the last sort of quarters, or I guess it would have been our third quarter call with Build-A-Bear that we made it through COVID for sure. And then where we gave some guidance that we expected to end the year the most profitable in the history of the company, which we then did do.
I love it.
Yeah.
So can you share some of those stories, especially the formative one? Can you give us one of the stories from the book, or that you didn't include in the book, but how a pivotal shift in your childhood can really impact the adulthood and how you learn from it?
Yeah. The first chapter is called Life is a Beech, BEECH, as in a great big tree.
Love it.
And there was a summer where I was about 11, where my grandmother had passed away. And so my family was she's the matriarch of our family. And my dad was an only child, and we had a historic family home, and my dad everybody was distracted. So, we just had to kind of fend for ourselves, which wasn't unusual back in the 70s.
Right.
And I had stumbled upon this massive beech tree in this place called the Pine Woods. We all have these stories, and I'd never really noticed it before, but I was really too small to attempt to climb this tree. But I could see that people had climbed it because they had carved their names, their initials way up and above this huge branch. And so that ended up being my focus that summer. It was sort of, I guess you could say, maybe it was the way I was dealing with guilt dealing with a grief. And everybody else was finding their way. So I kind of planned this in secret. I didn't tell anybody. I was trying. Every couple of days, I'd try to climb this tree, slide down, big snaky roots. It was tough. Finally got up there, and I'm like, woo, forgot my pocket knife. So
oh no,
no trees were harmed in the climbing of this tree.
Story.
But I figured out I was lost. I mean, I was stuck. I could not get down. I didn't know how to get down.
Right.
If I jumped down, I would break an ankle. It was all these snaky roots. I didn't know how to get down, just sat up there. So then I ask you a question about, what have you done? How do you set your goals? And that this was and challenge people to think about setting really big goals, and sort of postulate that life is not a corporate ladder. There's no ladder.
Right.
That's a joke. Right. There's no one step in front of the other. There's no specific amount of space between those steps. Life's a tree, a big tree. You can decide which tree you want to climb. Right. Do you want to climb an easy pine tree, or do you want to take on a beech tree? And some of that's going to have to do with the mindset of what happens after you do all this planning and get stuck. Right. And I come back around and end it with, here's the two things I could have taken from that, right? I did get out of the tree. Okay, I figured out. I'm here to prove it today. I slid all the way out about 15 feet on the end, swung down, knew there was no way out. I was going to have to drop, rolled down in the residual pine needles, and ran home before it got dark, where I was going to get in big trouble.
Wow.
The street lights came on, right? Pulling pine needles out of my hair on the way home. Right. Slid in the back door, and that was the end of that. The two things that I could have decided was I should create really big goals in life, or rather yet, say it the other way, I should not create really big goals in my life because the outcome could be scary and dangerous. Okay. Or I should set really big goals in life because the outcome could be fun and adventuresome. Right. And because I went back and climbed that tree many times that summer, just to swing down, the second answer became a mantra for my life.
Got it. I love that.
Right?
Cool.
Go for it.
Yeah.
Even if you get stuck.
I love that. Did you grow up in a pessimistic household, or more of an optimistic household?
Optimistic household.
Okay, I thought that was the case, but I just wanted to ask. So Sharon, I love this. Thank you for everything. I have a few more questions and then we can wrap up. What are some timeless lessons that you haven't shared that you'd like to share with the audience about leadership or about life or about business in any way you want to go with that?
Oh, gee, there's so many. I just sort of drained myself by pulling this book out of my soul over the last 24 months.
I know how it feels. It took me 5 years and 5 failed manuscripts. I write the whole thing, threw it away, didn't like it, wrote it again, threw it away until I finally got it. So I feel your pain. So
well, I've actually had people, how long did it take you to write the book? And I'm like, about 50 years.
My whole life, exactly.
So that's been quite a cathartic process on top of everything that's been going on. But it really does have to do with, at the end of the day, back to your question, can you look at things, can you keep spinning things that happen to you and finding the why that could be for the positive? And I know that that's really, really difficult in the most acute situations.
Right.
And I'm going to isolate some of those, and that's not for me to speak about. But for most of us, the things that happen every day, we often put way too much emotional energy in them, or look at them immediately as negative, when it's really probably there for a different reason.
Right.
And even if that's not true, if you don't choose to believe that, it doesn't matter if it's true. That's the magic.
Right.
Because the magic is found in the fact that you're willing to do that.
I love that.
And so the end of the day, the subtitle of the book of being Unlike the Power of Your Personal Stories to Create a Life You Love, it's that, one, you can rethink the narrative on any of your personal stories.
100%. Wow, that is so powerful. Yeah.
And then make it empowering for you on how you decide what you can and cannot do, what you are or are not capable of.
Just literally change the story.
That's it. Change the story. There's tons of data on about 80% of our memories are false anyway.
100%,
so why don't you choose to make them empowering?
Right. It's so genius. I love that.
So, and then when you get really good at that, you can start creating your own narrative for the future.
Right. I love it. Well, Sharon, thank you so much for coming on the show, and we'll hopefully have you on again and again and again. This has been fantastic.
Thanks, Adam. It's been a pleasure.